Hi everybody, we've come to day 3, we've come to Tuesday, so I'm going to start off with a joke. Did you hear about the guy going around different towns and he was jabbing people with knitting needles? The police believe that he was trying to make a point, was following some sort of pattern. Boom boom. Now the word needle, it can be used either as a verb or also as a noun. As a noun, a needle might be a small, slender, usually steel instrument. We all know what needles are. It's got an eye in there. You can sometimes thread it. It's also used for surgical stitches. So that's a needle. Used for sewing, used for a number of things. Also a record player used to have the needle there. Young people, record players making a big impact at the moment. As a verb, my dad always used to say this when my brother and I were fighting. You stop and put the needle in him. Meaning that a person might prick or pierce something, that's as well. And provoke somebody as well. That's with continued criticism or questioning. So you can needle somebody. Today we're looking at day number 3 in the last week of the life of Jesus. So we're going to notice that Jesus spent his entire day trying to open people at that time had really closed minds and their hearts were hardened as well. With his final messages. It's Tuesday, which means it's T-minus 3 days until his crucifixion and T-minus 5 days until his resurrection. So on Sunday we looked at Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. Yesterday we looked at his cursing of the fig tree and the cleansing of the temple. So today we're going to look at Jesus spending all day teaching. Now he taught his disciples on the way to Jerusalem, and then he taught his disciples, the crowds, the religious leaders in the temple. The Gospel of Matthew, it actually devotes 4 chapters to Jesus teaching on that particular Tuesday, 2,000 years ago. The Gospels of Mark and Luke devote 2 chapters to Jesus teaching that day. John's Gospel doesn't include any of this teaching section, but John, what he does, he devotes a number of chapters to Jesus' teaching of the disciples on the Thursday night after the Last Supper. So Luke ends his teaching section with these words. If you've got your Bible, jump quickly to Luke chapter 21. Let's have a look at verse 37 and 38. So I've just got it down the bottom here. Each day Jesus was teaching at the temple, and each evening he went out to spend the night on the hill called the Mount of Olives. And all the people came early in the morning to hear him at the temple. Okay. So all that Jesus taught in these chapters, they may not have been taught just on a Tuesday. We aren't told about specific teachings on Wednesday and Thursday, but what Luke recorded at the end of the teaching section may imply that. So we cover all that Jesus taught that Tuesday or during his final days, because there are 5 at least 15 different topics or parables, and some of them are quite complicated and technical, like the section addressing the signs of the end of the age. What I'd like us to do is to get a sense of why Jesus was addressing those topics at that particular time in his ministry, and how these teachings would have impacted the disciples, how it would have also impacted the crowds, how it would have impacted the religious leaders, and how I still believe that these teachings impact us to this very day. Jump with me to Mark chapter 11. We're going to have a look at verse 20 to 24. Mark 11, 20 to 24. In the morning, as they went along, they saw the fig tree withered from the roots. Remember that? Peter remembered and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, look, the fig tree you cursed is withered." "You have faith in God," answered... I've gone too far. No, I haven't. I'm going up to 24. "Have faith in God," Jesus answered. "Truly I tell you, if anyone says to the mountain, 'Go, throw yourself into the sea,' and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." If you remember on Monday, yesterday morning, the day before, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way to Jerusalem, Jesus was hungry. Remember what I said? He was hungry and went to the fig tree looking for something to eat, but when he found nothing, he cursed the fig tree. We looked at how the fruitless fig tree represented the fruitless religion of Israel. That was really important. So now we've got a day after cursing the tree, Jesus and his disciples are on their way from Bethany and they're heading back to Jerusalem. And they've got to go past the same fig tree. Just 24 hours beforehand, the tree had been green and had been healthy. Remember what it said in that last passage you read? But now it was dry and dead. The disciples, they're really amazed. And as usual, Peter spoke up. Love Peter says, "Look what happened to the fig tree. You cursed." Jesus sees this moment to drive home the point that they'll be able to do what he did, even more through faith and through prayer. That's a really important lesson for us. It's sad that these words of Jesus get hijacked sometimes with our name it and claim it people. They want to reduce this grand promise to new cars or more money or healthy bodies. Jesus wanted those disciples and his disciples today, that's each and every one of us, you and I, to know God's power is still available to accomplish God's kingdom purposes, not our own purposes. And we need to exercise faith and we need to pray. God wants his people to be able to move mountains. And I guess he wants us to move mountains of evil, mountains of sin, mountains of fear, so that we can remain faithful and help build God's kingdom. He doesn't need any help, but he does need us to have faith in him and to continue to do what we need to do. It's a pretty good lesson, isn't it, to begin with on that Tuesday morning, wouldn't you say? How many of us need to take that message to heart today? What mountains do we need God to move today? What do we need that in our lives? Let's continue with Mark 11:27-28. They arrived again in Jerusalem, and while Jesus was walking in the temple courts, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders came to him. "But what authority are you doing these things?" they asked. "And who gave you authority to do this?" Matthew, Mark, Luke all include this incident of questioning the authority of Jesus. The procedure, this is really important here, the procedure for being recognized as a religious leader in Israel was quite simple. Originally, the rabbinical candidates had been ordained by the leading rabbi. This rabbi would have had to be somebody whom they respected and under whose teaching they served as well. But this unfortunately led to a variance in qualifications and teachings, as well as, I guess, widespread abuse, which still happens today. So the High Jewish Council, called the Sanhedrin, they took over the responsibility for ordination. When they ordained a man, he was declared a rabbi, an elder, and a judge, and he was given authority to teach, to express wisdom and render verdicts. We shouldn't be surprised that the religious leaders asked Jesus, "Who gave this authority to you?" Because they knew he hadn't been ordained by them by a rabbi. Though Jesus knew their hearts and knew that they really weren't interested in the truth. So he said this, "I'll answer your question if you will first answer mine. Was John's baptism from heaven or human origin?" I love this. They knew if they answered that it was from God, then they should have listened to John and would have to believe in Jesus. So it's really important here, because John believed in Jesus, but if they answered that it wasn't from God, then they would be in trouble with the whole crowd. So they played dumb and they answered, "We don't know." Jesus replied, "If you won't answer my question, then I won't answer yours." I'm really struck with the irony of the Creator, these people here, asking the Creator about his credentials, asking Jesus about his credentials. It's like the pot asking the potter where he got his college degree. Jesus didn't need their ordination. He had God's stamp of approval. Matthew then records three parables of Jesus: the parable of the two sons, the parable of the tenants, the parable of the wedding banquet. Mark and Luke only include the parable of the tenants. The first story about a man, two sons, went to the first, said, "Son, go work," you know the story, "go work in the vineyard." The son said he wouldn't. but then changed his mind, and then he went. The father went to the second son, and he said the same thing: "Go work in the vineyard." The son said he wouldn't, but then didn't. Jesus asked the crowd which of the sons obeyed the father, and they answered the first. The son who said he would obey but didn't represent the unrepented religious leaders. That's what he did. He represented the unrepented religious leaders. But the son who said he wouldn't, but changed his mind, represented repentant sinners. Jesus then shocked them by saying in Matthew 21:31-32, which of the two did what his father wanted? The first, they answered. Jesus said to them, truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you. Then Jesus moved immediately into two stories that presented a common problem. The first story, a landowner who leased a vineyard to some tenants. At the harvest, the owner sent the servants to collect their share of the grapes, but the farmers grabbed the servants, beat one, killed another, then killed a third. The second is a story of a king who prepared a wedding feast for his son. When the feast was ready, you know the story, the king sent his two servants to tell the people that the banquet was ready, but they refused to come. So here we have a landowner, and we've got a king whose servants and messengers are ignored, beaten, and even killed. Surely the landowner and the king will wash their hands of these people, right? Or maybe the landowner will send the police, he might send the military in, right? Wrong. In both cases, they send more emissaries. In the first story, the last sent his son. Now, Jesus was painting a picture of a very patient and a very determined God. As both stories conclude, we see that the patience of the landowner and the king has run out. The first story, the wicked tenant, was brought to a wretched end, if you know the story. In the second story, the king gave up on those first invited. And he went out and he brought anyone who would come. But one who came wasn't dressed properly and was thrown out. Matthew records Jesus' most sobering words here in Matthew 21:43. Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to people who will produce its fruit. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all report that the Jewish religious leaders knew that Jesus had spoken these parables against them, and they looked for a way to arrest him immediately. Just as their fathers had rejected the prophets, now they were rejecting the prophet, God himself. So after these initial parables, the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all include Jesus being asked three questions. Now the questions were designed to trap Jesus into saying something wrong that would lead him to punishment or to rejection. The first of these questions had to do with paying taxes to Caesar. Let's go to Mark chapter 12, verse 13-14. Later they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. They came to him and said, Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others, because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? I want you to notice how they introduce their question. They introduce their question with the attempt to manipulate through flattery. Chances are that when a man slaps you on the back, he wants you to cough something up. And the Pharisees were doing exactly that same heavy back slapping. Oh, come on, well done, mate. Yeah, good one, Jesus. Now, for some people, flattery will get them everywhere, but not with Jesus. He saw through their hypocrisy, and he asked for a coin, and he asked whose portrait's on it. And since Caesar's portrait is on it, he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. When they heard this, they were all amazed. Amazing stuff, hey. The next question came from the Sadducees, who didn't believe in the resurrection. You've got to read some stuff up about the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Zealots, all these people, all these Bible people. They came up with an extreme version of an unlikely incident in order to trap Jesus and to make Jesus look foolish in front of people. They suggested that there were 7 brothers, and one of the brothers married but then died without leaving any children. Then each of the other 7 brothers were required to marry the woman, but then each died without leaving children. Their question was, whose wife will she be in the resurrection? Jesus corrected them, saying that they were way off base. They didn't know the scriptures or even the power of God. He explained that there would be no marriage in heaven, but there is a resurrection, because God, the God of the living, not the dead, and that includes Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Matthew tells us that when the Pharisees saw that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they thought they could stump Jesus. So they asked his question. They came up with, which was, of all the commandments, which is the most important? You've got to remember that the Pharisees were a very influential sect in Judaism and were very pious and very serious about keeping all the Old Testament law. This is a big challenge, come on, because there are over 600 specific laws in the Old Testament. With that many laws, it would be helpful to know which one is the most important. Jesus didn't give just one answer, but he gave 2. Love God, love your neighbour. And Jesus concluded by saying that these 2 were a fulfillment of all the Old Testament, all the other laws of God. The Gospel tells us that from then on, no one dared ask him any more questions. There was no stumping or trapping Jesus. Matthew then follows up the section of Jesus being questioned with a chapter basically sometimes called the 7 Woes, where Jesus gave scathing critique of the scribes and the Pharisees, found in Matthew 23, 1-7. I'm going to read that. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome load and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their paracletes wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honour at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplace and to be called rabbi by others. Then after the long chapter with the 7 woes, Jesus concludes his critique in Matthew 23, right at the end, verse 33, and he says, You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? If everything up to that point wasn't enough to push the Jewish leadership over the edge, so you can just understand how they're feeling right at this moment, surely the 7 woes would have done it. Jesus had pulled out all stops, and at that point Matthew tells us that Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples called his attention to the temple structure. And this is what he says in Matthew 24:2. And he replied to him, Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. We've got Matthew, Mark and Luke. They all devote an entire chapter to the signs of the end of the age. Countless books. There have been so many books have been written about these chapters, about the end times. Countless books, countless sermons. There's ominous phrases lurk in these chapters, like wars, the rumours of wars, how horrible it will be for women who are pregnant. There are terrifying and eerie descriptions, the sun growing dark and the moon not giving light, and vultures hovering around the dead and lightning flashes. But what does it all mean? Some feel that the entire chapter is symbolic and mustn't be interpreted literally. Others feel it's a combination of comments applied to the destruction of Jerusalem to the final return of Jesus. Still others believe the chapter has one purpose, to prepare us for the final judgment. I believe Jesus was speaking about both the destruction of Jerusalem and his second coming. The destruction of Jerusalem was something they would see coming, but the second coming would come so unexpectedly. Jesus' main purpose was to prepare his disciples for a cataclysmic event. It's preparing us as well, with what's happening in the world. His words of disasters rang true when the Romans brought Jerusalem to her knees in 70 AD. And it's just hard to grasp how shocking and unbelievable it must have been for his disciples. And put yourself into their shoes to hear about the destruction of the temple. The temple was a central feature in Jewish religion. It was a meeting place between people and God. It represented atonement, sacrifice, and the priesthood. It had been around since King Solomon, more than 1,000 years. It was a dazzling structure built with white marble and plated with gold. The temple area surrounded by porches, and the roof of the porches were pillars. Oh, amazing. Cut out of solid marble in one piece. They were 37.5 feet tall, so thick that 3 men joining hands couldn't barely encircle it. Oh. Now, I know that archaeologists have found cornerstones of the temple that measured 20 to 40 feet in length and weigh more than 400 tons. How shocking was Jesus' statement that not one stone would be left on another. But Jesus told them about the destruction of Jerusalem, the persecution that they would face, his final coming. So they wouldn't be surprised by it, and they would be prepared for it. You know, Matthew records 3 final parables that Jesus taught that particular day. He taught about the parable of the 10 virgins, the parable of the tenant, and the parable of the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25. Parable of the sheep and the goats are one of my favourite. So through those parables and Jesus' message about the end of the age and the final day and hour being unknown, Jesus is giving his disciples their marching orders. They were to be on their guard. Watch out that no one deceives you. They were to be ready at all times. Keep watch, because you don't know the day or the hour. They were to be faithful to the end. The one who stands firm to the end and the one who does God's will to the end will be saved. These things that Jesus taught that Tuesday and in the final days must have brought his disciples comfort, strength and peace. Things weren't going to be easy, but God would be with them. And it would be all worth it. Isn't it amazing, hey? What was true for them is also true for us. We're going to face the same things, and what we need to do is to follow the same marching orders. I want to finish off with a few application. Okay. So the first one is, like I said, I would finish with some applications every day. God gives each and every one of us a choice about what we'll do with Jesus and Jesus' teachings. There are a lot of things in life, as I was thinking about this, that we don't get to choose. Things like where and when we were born, or into what family or what race we were born. We don't get to choose the weather. We don't even get to choose how people respond to us. Some people probably hate us, don't like us. Some people love us. But what we do, we do get to choose where we spend eternity. It is the biggest choice. God leaves that decision to us. God has tried to make it clear what that choice means, and God has tried to make it really clear how much he cares about us, and to what great lengths and what great costs he was willing to go to give us that choice. So on Friday, the final week of Jesus' earthly life, we witnessed God allowing his hands to be pierced, not with a pin, not with a needle, but with spikes. Jesus allowed his hands and his feet to be pierced to try to open our closed minds and hearts. But even after all God has done, everything God has done to demonstrate his kindness, his mercy, his love, it still leaves us with a choice, either to receive him or to reject him. For 2,000 years, Jesus has been trying to open minds and penetrate hearts. He wants you to come today. If you don't know Jesus Christ, this is a perfect opportunity. The choice is really yours today. If you're watching this and you don't know Jesus, it's an incredible thing. And you can mark it down on that Tuesday the 12th, the year follow Jesus. I hope that every single one of us who are watching this does choose to follow Jesus and has followed Jesus for many years. So hey, bless ya. I'll see you again on Wednesday. So day 3 is out the way. So continue to be encouraged, and I want you to continue to draw nearer to Jesus and to love him more as we follow the Passion Week. Bless you all.